The old Labrador found 3 abandoned kittens, but 2 years later, they saved her life. The sun rose over the Miller farm, casting a golden glow on the rolling hills of Vermont. Maggie, a 5-year-old Labrador retriever with a coat the color of burnt caramel, stretched out her limbs, enjoying the warmth that seeped through the old farmhouse's wooden floorboards. Her tail thumped a happy rhythm against the floor as she yawned, a wide, pink tongue curling out from between her teeth. Life was good for Maggie. She had a loving family, John and Martha Miller, a kind, elderly couple who treated her like one of their own. She had the freedom to roam the vast expanse of the farm, chasing butterflies in the summer meadows and squirrels up the ancient oak trees. And she had a warm, cozy bed by the fireplace, where she spent her nights dreaming of chasing rabbits and fetching endless tennis balls. Maggie's day began with a routine as predictable as the sunrise. She'd nudge John awake with a wet nose, her tail wagging furiously in anticipation of their morning walk. John, a tall, lanky man with a weathered face and gentle blue eyes, would chuckle and scratch her behind the ears, his voice gruff with sleep. All right, Maggie girl, let's go see what the day's brought us." Their walk would take them through the dew-kissed fields, past the grazing cows and the clucking chickens, to the old apple orchard at the edge of the property. Here, Maggie would chase fallen apples, her joyous barks echoing through the crisp morning air. John would lean against the gnarled trunk of an old apple tree, watching her with a contented smile, his pipe smoke curling upwards like wisps of cloud. Back at the farmhouse, Martha, a plump, rosy-cheeked woman with a warm smile and a heart of gold, would be waiting with a breakfast of scrambled eggs and bacon, a special treat that Maggie only got on weekends. After breakfast, Maggie would spend her day exploring the farm, her nose twitching with the sense of the earth, her ears perked up for any interesting sounds. She'd chase butterflies in the meadows, her paws sinking into the soft grass. She'd help John with his chores, her tail wagging excitedly as she followed him around the barn. And she'd nap in the sunbeams that streamed through the kitchen window, her dreams filled with the sights and sounds of her beloved farm. Life was simple, peaceful, and filled with love. Maggie couldn't imagine anything more perfect. But fate, as it often does, had a surprise in store for her, a surprise that would change her life forever. One crisp autumn evening, a storm raged across the Vermont countryside. Rain lashed against the windows of the farmhouse, and the wind howled like a banshee, rattling the old window panes. Inside, Maggie lay curled up by the fireplace, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The storm didn't bother her. In fact, she found it rather cozy. The warmth of the fire, the rhythmic sound of the rain, and the familiar scent of John's pipe tobacco lulled her into a peaceful slumber. Suddenly, a faint sound pierced through the storm's cacophony, a high-pitched, desperate cry. Maggie's ears perked up, her head lifting from her paws. The cry came again, weaker this time, almost lost in the wind's roar. Curiosity and a nagging sense of concern stirred within her. She rose from her comfortable spot, her nails clicking on the wooden floor as she padded towards the back door. John, engrossed in his book by the fire, glanced up. "Where you going, girl?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the storm. Maggie whined softly, her tail giving a hesitant wag. She looked at the door, then back at John, her eyes pleading. All right, John sighed, getting up to open the door. "But be quick about it. Don't want you catching a chill." Maggie burst out into the storm, the wind whipping at her fur, the rain stinging her face. She followed the sound of the cries, her nose leading the way. It led her to the old barn, its wooden frame groaning under the onslaught of the wind. She pushed her way through the creaking doors, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Inside the barn, the air was thick with the scent of hay and dust. The cries were louder now, coming from the far corner, where a pile of old sacks lay discarded. Maggie cautiously approached, her senses on high alert. As she drew closer, she saw them, 3 tiny kittens, their eyes barely open, their fur matted and damp. They were huddled together, shivering, their mewing weak and desperate. Maggie's heart melted with pity. They were so small, so vulnerable. She nudged them gently with her nose, her warm breath enveloping their tiny bodies. They instinctively crawled towards her warmth, their cries softening into tiny whimpers. Maggie knew she had to help them. She carefully picked one up by the scruff of its neck, its tiny body light as a feather. She carried it back to the farmhouse, her maternal instincts kicking in. She placed the kitten gently by the fire, then returned for the other two. John watched in surprise as Maggie brought the kittens in, one by one. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, his eyes widening. "Where did you find these little fellas?" Maggie couldn't answer, of course, but her eyes spoke volumes. She looked at John, then at the kittens, her tail wagging gently. John understood. He knew Maggie had taken these helpless creatures under her wing. That night, Maggie curled up by the fire, the three kittens nestled against her warm fur. As the storm raged outside, a new kind of warmth spread through Maggie's heart, the warmth of motherhood. She had found a new purpose, a new love, and she knew, with a certainty that only a mother could possess, that she would protect these tiny creatures with her life. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and sparkling. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the scene unfolding on the rug. Maggie, lying on her side, her belly a soft, warm haven for three tiny kittens, latched onto her teats and suckling with gusto. John and Martha watched in awe. "Well, I'll be," Martha whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "She's taken them in as her own." John chuckled. "Seems like it. Never thought I'd see the day Maggie would be a mama to a bunch of cats." The kittens, now dry and clean, were a picture of contentment. Their tiny paws kneaded Maggie's fur, their eyes closed in blissful satisfaction. Maggie, in turn, radiated a calm, maternal energy. She licked their heads, her rough tongue a gentle caress, and nuzzled them closer, her tail thumping softly against the rug. The initial days were a whirlwind of activity. The kittens, barely a week old, were completely helpless. Maggie, despite her maternal instincts, had no experience with such tiny creatures. She had to learn how to feed them, keep them warm, and protect them from the dangers of the farmhouse. Martha, with her years of experience raising farm animals, became Maggie's guide. She showed Maggie how to stimulate the kittens to eliminate, how to keep their makeshift nest clean, and how to supplement their diet with kitten milk replacer when Maggie's milk wasn't enough. John, ever the handyman, built a small pen in the living room, lined with soft blankets and toys. This became the kittens' safe haven, a place where they could play and explore under Maggie's watchful eye. Despite the challenges, Maggie thrived in her new role. She was a natural mother, patient and attentive. She spent hours grooming the kittens, her rough tongue gently cleaning their tiny bodies. She played with them, her tail wagging excitedly as they chased it across the floor. And she protected them fiercely, her deep growl warning off any curious farm animals that ventured too close. The kittens, in turn, flourished under Maggie's care. They grew stronger each day, their eyes opening to reveal a world of wonder. They began to explore their surroundings, their tiny paws tentatively venturing out of their pen. They played with each other, their playful nips and tumbles filling the farmhouse with a new kind of joy. As the weeks passed, the kittens' personalities began to emerge. The largest of the three, a tabby with bold stripes and mischievous green eyes, was named Rusty. He was the most adventurous, always the first to explore new territory and the last to settle down. The smallest, a calico with a patchwork of colors and a shy demeanor, was named Patches. She was the most timid, often clinging to Maggie for comfort. And the middle one, a sleek black kitten with bright yellow eyes, was named Midnight. He was the most playful, always ready for a game of chase or a wrestling match. Maggie loved them all equally, her heart swelling with pride as she watched them grow. She had found a new purpose in life, a new kind of love. And in these three tiny creatures, she had found a family of her own. The kittens, No longer the helpless creatures Maggie had found in the barn, were now a whirlwind of energy. Rusty, true to his name, was a mischievous adventurer, constantly exploring the farmhouse and its surroundings. He climbed curtains, scaled bookshelves, and even attempted to conquer the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Patches, though still shy, was growing more confident, venturing further from Maggie's side and even initiating play with her brothers. Midnight, the playful one, remained a constant source of amusement, his antics bringing laughter to the Miller household. Maggie, ever vigilant, kept a watchful eye on her adopted brood. She chased them down from precarious heights, retrieved them from under furniture, and patiently endured their playful attacks on her tail. She was their protector, their playmate, their surrogate mother. Life on the farm had taken on a new rhythm. The kittens, now weaned and fully mobile, were a constant presence, their playful meows and scampering paws filling the once quiet farmhouse with a vibrant energy. They followed Maggie everywhere, their tiny shadows trailing behind her as she went about her daily routine. John and Martha doted on the kittens, spoiling them with treats and toys. Martha knitted them tiny sweaters to keep them warm during the chilly Vermont winters, while John built them elaborate climbing structures out of old crates and planks. The kittens, in turn, brought a new joy to the elderly couple's lives, their playful antics a constant source of amusement and affection. One sunny afternoon, as Maggie lay dozing in the backyard, the kittens discovered a new playground, the old apple orchard. The gnarled trees, with their low-hanging branches and hidden hollows, were a feline paradise. Rusty, the fearless leader, was the first to climb, his claws finding purchase on the rough bark. Patches, hesitant at first, soon followed, encouraged by Midnight's playful nudges. Maggie, awakened by their excited meows, watched with amusement as they explored their new domain. She joined in their games, chasing them up the trees and pouncing on them from behind bushes. The orchard echoed with their playful sounds, a symphony of barks, meows, and rustling leaves. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the orchard, Maggie herded her kittens back to the farmhouse. They followed her willingly, their energy spent, their tiny bodies weary from a day of play. That night, curled up by the fireplace, Maggie watched as the kittens slept peacefully beside her. A sense of contentment washed over her. She had found her purpose, her family, and in these three mischievous, loving creatures, she had found a love that transcended species, a bond that would last a lifetime. Spring arrived, painting the Vermont landscape in vibrant hues of green and gold. The apple orchard, once bare and skeletal, was now a canopy of blossoms, their sweet fragrance filling the air. The kittens, now almost a year old, were no longer the clumsy toddlers they once were. They had grown into sleek, agile young cats, their movements graceful and precise. Rusty, the adventurer, had become a skilled hunter, his sharp claws and teeth bringing down mice and voles with ease. Patches, no longer timid, was a master climber, scaling the tallest trees with effortless grace. And Midnight, the playful one, was a whirlwind of energy, his acrobatic leaps and bounds a constant source of amusement. Maggie, though no longer needed as a surrogate mother, remained the center of their world. They followed her on her daily rounds, their sleek bodies weaving between her legs as she walked. They slept curled up beside her, their purrs a soothing lullaby, and they greeted her with enthusiastic head bumps and affectionate licks whenever she returned from a trip to the barn or a walk with John. One warm afternoon, a shadow fell over their idyllic world. A new predator had arrived on the farm, a sleek, cunning bobcat, its eyes gleaming with hunger. It lurked in the shadows of the woods, its presence a silent threat to the farm's inhabitants. Maggie, with her keen senses, was the first to sense the danger. She grew restless, her ears pricked, her nose twitching with the unfamiliar scent. She watched the treeline with a wary eye, her protective instincts on high alert. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, the bobcat made its move, crept towards the farmhouse, its eyes fixed on the unsuspecting kittens playing in the yard. Maggie, sensing the imminent danger, sprang into action. She barked a warning, her deep growl echoing through the twilight. The kittens, startled by her sudden alarm, looked up, their playful mood instantly replaced by fear. The bobcat, surprised by Maggie's intervention, hesitated. It sized up the Labrador, its muscles coiled, ready to strike. Maggie stood her ground, her body tense, her teeth bared. She was ready to defend her adopted family with her life. A tense standoff ensued, the two predators circling each other, their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. The kittens, huddled together, watched in terror, their tiny bodies trembling. Suddenly, the bobcat lunged, its claws extended, its jaws open in a snarl. Maggie met its attack head-on, her powerful jaws clamping down on the bobcat's shoulder. A fierce struggle ensued, the two animals rolling across the ground in a tangle of fur and claws. The kittens, their fear momentarily forgotten, watched in awe as Maggie fought with a ferocity they had never seen before. They knew, instinctively, that their beloved Maggie was risking her life to protect them. The fight was brutal, but Maggie's courage and determination prevailed. She managed to inflict a deep bite on the bobcat's flank, causing it to yelp in pain and retreat into the woods. Maggie, panting and bruised, but victorious, returned to the kittens, her tail wagging weakly. They swarmed around her, licking her wounds, their purrs a balm to her aching body. John and Martha, alerted by the commotion, rushed out of the farmhouse, their faces etched with worry. They were relieved to find Maggie and the kittens safe, but their hearts ached at the sight of Maggie's injuries. That night, as Maggie lay by the fireplace, her body sore, her spirit weary, she felt a warmth spread through her. It wasn't just the warmth of the fire, but the warmth of love, the love of a mother who had risked her life to protect her young. And in the grateful eyes of her 3 adopted kittens, she saw a reflection of that love, a bond that no danger could ever break. The encounter with the bobcat left a lingering unease on the Miller farm. John, concerned for the safety of his animals, reinforced the barn doors and chicken coop, and began carrying his old hunting rifle with him on his walks. Martha, ever the worrier, kept a closer eye on the kittens, herding them indoors at dusk and fretting over every scratch and scrape. The kittens, though shaken by the incident, gradually returned to their playful ways. Rusty, ever bold, seemed to relish the added excitement, his explorations now tinged with a sense of daring. Patches, however, remained wary, her newfound confidence shaken. She clung closer to Maggie, seeking comfort in her presence. Midnight, seemingly unaffected, continued his carefree antics, his playful spirit a welcome distraction from the lingering tension. Maggie, though physically healed, bore the emotional scars of the encounter. The bobcat's attack had awakened a primal fear within her, a fear for the safety of her adopted family. She became more protective, her vigilance bordering on paranoia. She shadowed the kittens relentlessly, her watchful eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. This heightened anxiety began to affect her relationship with the kittens. They, now young adults, craved more independence, their natural instincts urging them to explore and establish their own territories. Maggie's constant hovering and her anxious warnings began to grate on their nerves. Rusty, always the independent one, was the first to rebel. He would slip away from Maggie's watchful eye, venturing further afield, his adventures taking him beyond the safety of the farm. Maggie, frantic with worry, would track him down, her scolding barks echoing through the woods. Rusty, though chastised, would soon repeat his escapades, his adventurous spirit undeterred. Patches, though less inclined to wander, also felt the strain of Maggie's overbearing protection. She longed for quiet moments of solitude, for the freedom to climb her favorite tree without Maggie's anxious calls. She began to withdraw, seeking refuge in the barn loft or the quiet corners of the farmhouse. Midnight, ever the peacemaker, tried to bridge the growing gap between Maggie and his siblings. He would playfully distract Maggie when she became too insistent, or nudge Patches towards her for a comforting cuddle. But even his efforts couldn't fully mend the fraying bonds. John and Martha, sensing the changing dynamics, tried to intervene. They reassured Maggie that the bobcat was gone, that the farm was safe. They encouraged the kittens to stay closer to home, to heed Maggie's warnings. But their words seemed to fall on deaf ears. A sense of melancholy settled over the Miller farm. The carefree joy of the previous months had been replaced by a tense undercurrent. Maggie, once the heart of their little family, now seemed like an outsider, her anxieties pushing her adopted kittens away. One evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, Maggie sat by the porch, watching the kittens play in the fading light. A wave of sadness washed over her. She longed for the days when they were small and helpless, when their world revolved around her. Now they were growing up, their own instincts and desires pulling them away from her. She knew she had to let go, to trust that they could take care of themselves. But the lingering fear of that bobcat's attack, held her back. She was caught in a painful paradox, her love for her kittens battling against her fear for their safety. Summer waned, and the days grew shorter, the air crisp with the approaching autumn. The leaves on the maple trees lining the driveway turned to fiery shades of red and orange, their beauty a poignant reminder of the passage of time. A sense of change hung heavy over the Miller farm, a change that went beyond the turning of the seasons. John, always a sturdy man despite his age, began to slow down. His daily walks with Maggie grew shorter, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He spent more time in his armchair by the fire, his weathered hands trembling as he held his book. Martha, her heart heavy with worry, fussed over him, her cheerful demeanor masking a growing fear. Maggie, sensing the shift in her human companion, stayed close, her head resting on his knee as he sat by the fire. She would whine softly, licking his hand as if trying to soothe away his pain. The kittens, too, seemed to understand. They would curl up on the rug at John's feet, their purrs a gentle comfort. One chilly October morning, John didn't wake up. Martha found him in his armchair, his face peaceful, a faint smile gracing his lips. He looked as if he were merely sleeping, but the stillness of his chest, the absence of his gentle snores, told a different story. The grief that descended upon the farmhouse was palpable. Martha, heartbroken, moved through the days and a days, her tears a constant companion. Maggie, her loyal heart aching, stayed by Martha's side, her presence a silent source of comfort. The kittens, sensing the somber mood, were subdued. Their playful antics ceased, their meows soft and mournful. They would often sit by the window, gazing out at the fields where they had once chased butterflies with John, their eyes filled with a sadness they couldn't comprehend. The farm, once a place of vibrant life, now echoed with an emptiness that seemed to seep into every corner. The chores were neglected, the laughter silenced. Even the changing seasons seemed to hold no joy. One day, as Martha sat by John's grave, her tears falling on the cold stone, Maggie nudged her hand, her eyes filled with understanding. She led Martha back to the farmhouse, her tail wagging gently, as if urging her to keep going. Slowly, life began to find a new rhythm. Martha, with Maggie's unwavering support, started to tend to the farm again. The chores, once a burden, became a way to honor John's memory, to keep his spirit alive. The kittens, sensing Martha's renewed strength, began to play again, their laughter a fragile echo of the joy that had once filled the farmhouse. Maggie, her heart still heavy with grief, found solace in her role as protector and companion. She watched over Martha with a fierce loyalty, her presence a constant reminder of John's love. She played with the kittens, their youthful energy a balm to her aching soul. As winter approached, blanketing the farm in a pristine white, a sense of peace settled over the Miller household. The grief remained, a dull ache in their hearts, but it was now intertwined with a quiet resilience, a determination to carry on. One evening, As Martha sat by the fire, watching the flames dance, she felt a warm, furry body press against her. Maggie, her head resting on Martha's lap, looked up at her with eyes filled with love and understanding. In that moment, Martha knew she wasn't alone. She had Maggie, her loyal companion, and the kittens, her adopted family. And together, they would face the future, their hearts bound by a love that had weathered loss and found strength in shared grief. 2 years had passed since John's passing. The initial rawness of grief had softened, leaving a bittersweet ache in Martha's heart. Life on the Miller farm had found a new equilibrium, a quieter rhythm punctuated by the familiar sounds of farm life and the comforting presence of her animal companions. Maggie, now 7 years old, had matured into a dignified matriarch. Her muzzle was sprinkled with gray, and her gait had lost some of its youthful spring, but her eyes still held the same warmth and intelligence. She remained Martha's constant shadow, her presence a comforting anchor in a world that had shifted on its axis. The kittens, now fully grown cats, had each carved out their own niche on the farm. Rusty, true to his adventurous spirit, had become a skilled hunter, his territory extending far beyond the farm's boundaries. He would often disappear for days, returning with trophies of his exploits, a plump field mouse, a feathery bird, or even, on one memorable occasion, a young opossum. Patches, her initial shyness replaced by a quiet confidence, had become Martha's indoor companion. She spent her days curled up on John's old armchair, basking in the sunbeams that streamed through the window, or perched on the back of the sofa, observing the world with her wise, green eyes. Midnight, the playful one, remained a constant source of amusement. He was everyone's friend, equally at ease with Maggie, Martha, and the occasional farmhand who came to help with the chores. His acrobatic antics and affectionate head bumps brought laughter to the farmhouse, a reminder of the simple joys that life still held. One crisp autumn afternoon, a familiar figure appeared at the farm gate. A young woman, her face etched with a mixture of sadness and hope, stood hesitantly, her eyes searching the yard. Martha, her heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and curiosity, stepped out onto the porch. "Hello," the woman said, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Sarah. I used to live here." Martha's eyes widened in recognition. Sarah, John's granddaughter, who had left the farm years ago after a falling out with her father. Martha had often wondered what had become of her, her heart aching for the lost connection. "Sarah," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. "Come in, child. Come in." Sarah's arrival brought a new wave of emotion to the Miller farm. Old wounds were reopened, tears were shed, and memories, both joyful and painful, were shared. But through it all, there was a sense of healing, a rekindling of a bond that had been lost for too long. Maggie, with her uncanny intuition, sensed the significance of Sarah's return. She welcomed Sarah with a gentle nudge and a soft lick, her tail wagging in approval. The cats, too, seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. They rubbed against Sarah's legs, purring their welcome. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah settled into life on the farm. She helped Martha with the chores, her youthful energy a welcome addition. She spent hours talking with Martha, sharing stories of her life, her regrets, and her hopes for the future. And she formed a special bond with Maggie and the cats, their presence a comforting reminder of her grandfather's love. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Sarah turned to Martha, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for welcoming me back, for giving me a second chance." Martha smiled, her heart filled with warmth. "Your family, Sarah," she said. "You always have been." As the fire crackled and the cats purred contentedly, a sense of peace settled over the farmhouse. Life had thrown its share of challenges, of loss and grief, but through it all, love had endured, finding new forms, new expressions, and new beginnings. And in the heart of the old farmhouse, surrounded by her animal companions and the renewed connection with family, Martha knew that life, in its own mysterious way, had found a way to heal and to bloom again.